most business people who had done it, they said, you sell out the private equity, sell out the venture capitalists. Most people will regret that in the long run. And if you can just hang it together for a while and get over that, that initial debt, it'll probably pay dividends in the long run. Not just monetarily, but being able to take care of your practice and your patients.
Five REIs, all the REIs that work at one independent practice in one podcast episode. Who could do that? Rogan can't do that. Color Daddy can't do that. Only one megalithic media empire is able to pull that off. That's Inside Reproductive Health. What do we talk about? What makes this conversation interesting? I'm not going to give you the guest bios. That's what LinkedIn's for. You can go to their practice website, Carolina Conceptions, and read their CVs for yourself. Let me instead tell you what they're all about. 5 different doctors in very different parts of their career. You got Dr. Bill Meyer, one of the co-founding partners of this group. He's retiring at the end of the year. Then you got Dr. John Park, senior partner, lots of years left to practice medicine. You got Dr. Megan Bowling, who is a junior partner. Then you've got Dr. Lauren Johnson, who escaped the IntegraMed disaster years ago, now becoming a partner in 2026. And finally, you got an associate, Dr. Monica Schoentuck, hardly 2 years out of fellowship. This was cool to have all 5 docs that work in a practice like this in different stages of their career, having fun and being able to get different perspectives on the same issues. We talk about the golden parachute of private equity and the resistance to cashing out for that golden parachute. I've heard a lot of people say what Dr. Meyer says in this interview, and what often happens is the nobility gives way to the practicality of a ton of money. But I think Dr. Meyer's actually walking the walk. Listen to what he says. A lot of what REIs hear is high volume, high volume, high volume. You hear that from me too. Dr. Park has a different view. If you like that view of practicing medicine, you might want to get in touch with this group. With Doctors Bowling and Johnson, I pressed them a bit about the tension that independent practices have when they have to focus so intensely on the immediate delivery of care, how hard it is to invest in overall operations. They talk about new technology that they've implemented and partners that they worked with in patient finance and EMR, what they're using and what they like about it. And I asked Dr. Schoentuck why she chose to go work for an independently owned private practice that for the foreseeable future intends to remain privately owned when so many of her peers went to go work for private equity-backed networks, and how she and they plan to align with new doctors that are coming in. It was the folks at MidCap that made this all possible. If you're even 5+ years out from selling your practice or your fertility business, talk to MidCap. It's not an endorsement. I've never sold my business to them. I just think they're really honest, smart folks. And they're also really patient. They don't charge you anything. They get paid if you do a deal with them, and they help you a ton either way. But if you're a young nurse, young embryologist, young practice manager, young REI, and you're thinking, I just want to work with my people, listen to this episode, because I felt like I got to be a bug on the wall in their practice. Like, it was fun. And I think when you hear them talk to each other and you hear them opine on these different issues, you can get a glimpse of what it might be like to work for an outfit like this. So have fun being a bug on the wall as I did, and enjoy this conversation with the team at Carolina Conceptions.
Today's advertiser helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertiser. The advertiser does not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertiser.
Okay, here we go. My first 5-guest podcast. Let's see if I can do this. Dr. Bowling, Dr. Schoentuck, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Park, Dr. Meyer, Megan, Monica, Lauren, John, Bill, welcome to the Inside Reproductive Health Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Griffin.
This isn't how it happened, but John, this is how I'm going to tell people that it happened, that I invited you on the show and you said, no way, Jones, it's all 5 of us, or it's none of us. That's how I'm gonna tell people that it happened. But I actually do think that it is interesting that I invited you and Bill on because I'm a little bit more familiar with you two. And you said, well, what about the rest of our group? And I think that speaks to something. Why was that important to you?
Well, we're definitely a team here. And also with this particular topic that you wanted to cover, I felt like we all had something to contribute here. Out of the 5 of us, Bill and I have been here the longest, but we have people at various stages of their career. And so just felt like this episode could be a lot more interesting to get all 5 of our inputs on the topic.
That topic being, I've got a pulse on independent practices, or I always try to keep a pulse on independent practices. And I think that the future is there's multiple avenues of where fertility practices might go. For you all, where do you want your practice to go when you sit together? How do you articulate what you want the vision to be, and then how do you all align around it?
Honestly, most of the time we don't sit around and talk about which way we want the practice to go. We just kind of deal with, daily and weekly problems, I think. I think uniformly we've all, the partners have at least discussed private equity and venture capital takeovers before, but we really, in the past we were interested in a couple times. And I think the junior partners look towards the senior partners because we've dealt with that in the past. And I think everybody's impression is about the same. So
Which is what? What's that impression?
right now we're comfortable staying independent.
Is there a tension between the senior partners and the junior partners? Because what it seems to me is that it's a different value proposition depending on what stage of your career that you're in. And so it might be really good for you. It might be, that could be the golden parachute. Why also look at the junior partners as opposed to looking out to what might be in your best interest?
Yeah, I think it's the reason why we all, or I'll talk about myself since I'm the senior partner, went into this initially anyway. It wasn't really for the golden parachute. It was, take care of patients, live comfortably, and, kind of be your own boss. And, as of a couple years ago, we were approached by, venture capitalists again, and an outside group. And I think I discussed it with the junior partners. Hey, do we want to go any further with this? And some of the other doctors here tonight will kind of talk about that a little bit. But, I think from everybody, anytime we have been approached before, I think we've all gone out and talked to other members, other people that we trust, fellows we trained with either or worked with in academics or when we were in our fellowship. And I think the experiences of those folks, even if it was a golden parachute, the way the practices were left was not something that I would want to leave a practice with. I think we all have kind of a reputation to kind of leave behind us. And I think in a lot of these golden parachute cases, the physicians who stay behind are not necessarily the happiest in their position. Taking a golden parachute, you still have to work with people, you still have to take care of patients, and you still have your reputation. So I think that, and based on the experience of other practices, is the reason that we never went that way.
I want to come back to that thought about the golden parachute and physicians not always being the happiest. But who's the newest to this crew? Is that you, Monica? How long have you been with it? How long?
It'll be 2 years in September.
Why did you decide to join this crew?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, the people, right? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Once you meet them, they're a great crew. It just felt like an excellent fit. They're all like amazing doctors. And for me, when I was looking for a practice, like the big pieces of the puzzle, if you will, that I looked at were really just pregnancy rates, because I knew I wanted a place with a great lab where I would have success in getting my patients pregnant. And so that was important to me. The reputation of the practice was really important to me. And Carolina Conceptions is like a very well established practice in Raleigh, and it's like one of the largest. Not to mention the physicians who have currently worked there, because I would need to see them daily, and they have very much so become my mentors and have helped me grow as a physician, which is excellent. And then the other piece of that puzzle, which I think speaks a lot to that portion of private equity versus being privately owned, is the ability to truly feel like I can care for my patients and provide individualized care and protocols that I think that would be best for that patient, and not necessarily fall into a templated or routine type of treatment. But
so would that put you at fellowship class of 22 or 23?
23.
I don't know if you all downloaded our fellowship placement list of 24, but do you all know how many fellows from last year's class went to work for independently owned practices? Of the 60 or so fellows, I think there were 60 fellows.
Probably very few.
7. 7 of the 60. So we didn't do that in 2020. We'll do it going forward. We didn't do it in 2023. I'll assume for the sake of this conversation that it was a similar number. Why did you choose to be an outlier, though? I mean, I get the benefits that you saw in this group, but it seems like the so many fellows are saying, yeah, but, and they're choosing to go work for private equity backed networks. What made you decide to go in a different direction?
Yeah. So I forget what conference it was, but they were talking about your first position that you take out of fellowship, and the likelihood that you actually stay with the practice that you sign with. And I think at that point, the rate was like 50% of people or so will leave the first practice that they sign with and go elsewhere. And honestly, like I'm very much a homebody, and I knew that I wanted to sign with the practice that I would stay with like forever, hopefully, right? Knock on wood, I know I'm not a partner yet. But I was just like truly looking for that 50% or like my forever. And so I think as a fellow, when you step out, you look for comfort, right? Like where am I going to be most successful and be able to like see my career out? And I could see how sometimes private equity, especially since they're like in lots of locations, and that may play a role as well, how that might be an easier choice because there is some stability in that. However, for us, it's just like such a different context comparative to like other privately owned, physician owned clinics. I don't think it's really common to have 5 docs. Like, I don't think it's very common to have such a well-established practice that does so well, even with like pregnancy rates and success rates. And we also have 4 different offices. Like, we're not a small group. And so I truly, when I interviewed here after meeting the docs and like seeing how big the practice is, I felt that same comfort that I think you would get when interviewing with a private equity company. So to me, that longevity, if you will, of the job was there. And so it made that decision much easier. Of course, there's like differences as well as you continue through that partnership track. That looks very different regardless of like where you are or where you sign, which Dr. Park was very helpful in describing when I was joining, because you don't learn that much about that in fellowship. But I think, you know, knowing that I was joining a practice that was solid, that had been here for years, that had that longevity and that high pregnancy rate, it was like the perfect mix to make me feel comfortable enough to make that jump.
It's not common to have an independently owned practice with 5 REIs anymore. It used to be common. They all got bought up for those golden parachute reasons. So you're still in the associate role. Bill and John, senior partners. Monica, Lauren, Megan and Lauren, are you the junior partners? Are you both partners at this point?
Partner. Yeah. And Dr.
And I am planning to be a partner 2026.
All right. So let's talk about that for a second, Lauren, because I met you a few years back at an ASRM roundtable, and I don't even remember what topic I had, but I do remember that you were with a practice at that time. And I think it was, I think everybody knows the Integramed story.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody that worked for any Integramed practice was faced with, well, what do I do now? Many of those folks decided to go independent. Many of them decided to go for networks. That would have been the opportunity for you to say, okay, I'm going to go for a network. I do remember something that you were a little bit more forward thinking than I think I see many associates being, of like, yeah, but somebody else could still come in and buy this thing. And, you know, somebody else could come in and swoop in. You were a little bit cautious about that, or not. Maybe cautious isn't the right word, but thoughtful. Can you tell me about your thought process at that time?
Yeah, I think when we met, I was still with an Integramed practice and really getting introduced to kind of what the concept of partnership looks like when you're part of a private equity group. And I think at that time I was still kind of wrapping my head around it. It was not something I got any education about in fellowship. I'm just very honest, going into private practice, I really didn't understand it, didn't know a whole lot about it. And I think kind of the more I learned about it, I definitely had, I think caution is a really appropriate word to use there. It was again, not necessarily what I expected. What my understanding of a private practice is what I have now, right? That the physicians own the practice, and when you get to be a partner, buy into the practice, and you own equity in the practice. And I assumed that that's how many private practices worked. And I was exploring that, I guess, at that time of what does it really mean to be a partner in a practice that's partnered with private equity.
What type of answer did you come to? What does it mean
Yeah.
in the alternatives that you chose not to pursue?
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert in this area. I feel like there are a lot of answers to that question. And I feel like I've heard of different models for that. There are certainly models where being a partner essentially is access to a revenue stream of the company, but not necessarily ownership of the company or the assets or any part of that. So that concept was new to me at that point. But is part of a partnership model, I think, in some private equity backed practices.
Megan, you're in such an interesting position, in my view. You've got two senior partners, you own equity, two young docs in the pipeline, hopefully coming up right behind you. What do you want out of this?
Yeah, I'm like the middle child here or something. I mean, I've seen it from both sides. I think when I started here, I always had it in the back of my mind, feeling like a little bit of nerves, like what if they sell the practice before I make partner? And so I think that can be a fear of a lot of kind of lower level associates in these practices. But I think part of the great thing about our practice is that we are a team. And part of the reason I joined this group is to have this amazing group of doctors that I work with. And we are an amazing clinic here in North Carolina, and that kind of power and success that we have from being one of the top clinics in our state just feels really good from a success standpoint, to be surrounded by other doctors who care as much as I do about like being the best every day. So you start to kind of lose a little bit of that fear. And then it's amazing when you become partner and you feel like, wow, I've got this kind of security now. But the other thing I see is that I'm really excited for Dr. Schoentuck and Dr. Johnson to kind of join us as they come through. And I think what it shows is the longevity of our practice, that, Dr. Meyer has started this amazing group and Dr. Park has built it up so much. And that's what we all want to continue to do. And so I'm excited to have the experience with the older partners and see myself as growing and becoming one of the older partners with some of the other doctors who really aren't that much younger than me.
For those of you that are interested in a golden parachute, if you're a fertility practice owner, you're another owner of a fertility business, you're looking for ways to increase the value of your practice, think about an exit, assess some sales strategies, meaning selling your business. Midcap advisors can help you. Midcap will work with you to help you understand your practice's current transactional value, its value drivers, and also provide practical ways to maximize your practice's value. This is what these guys do for a living. Dr. Minhas was a practice owner. He was a lab director. Bob Goodman worked as a healthcare administrator for decades. Richard Goldberg has done so many deals in the fertility space. They all work for Midcap now. They'll assist you with implementation, keeping you fully informed on changes in the mergers and acquisition marketplace writ large, so you know what's going on. So if you're thinking about that next chapter, even if it's not in the next year, it's 5 years down the road, maybe even longer, talk to those guys. Midcap can help you think about all of that stuff, and we'll include their contact information. Thinking of the golden parachute, again, your situation is different from where it is in Bill and John's spot. From my vantage point, I don't see a ton of upside for younger doctors, because I think if there's somebody else that owns 70% equity, and then the senior partners are left with 20 or 30% equity, and then they're cashing out, there's just not much left to bring in younger docs for them to have a real upside in the long term. Maybe I'm missing something. That's how I view a situation similar to yours. But are you the one saying hang on, guys, you're in a different position then so do you find yourself having to advocate for that?
Not recently. I mean, when I came on before I was partner, I think maybe Dr. Park and Dr. Meyer can speak to it more. We were approached by groups, and at that point I wasn't partner yet. And so I wasn't as much part of those conversations. But ultimately, I think, Dr. Park and Dr. Meyer kind of reached the decision that it wasn't worth it to sell. And so as we've had a few more offers, I think, since I've become partner, and it's already kind of like our decision is kind of made here. And so we're kind of less likely to kind of entertain those ideas at that point. So I haven't really had to, I think the whole group is kind of on the same page.
Bill and John, how many years are you guys apart? Nobody has to reveal, and never ask REI his age. But I mean, how many years are you all apart in terms of when you started?
We're only 2 months apart in age.
I thought
Some of us have aged better than others.
yeah, and we should clarify the other doctors aren't that much younger than you all.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
How many years more do you want to work for? If I can put you on the spot in front of the 20 million people that listen to this podcast, when you think about it, how many more years do you want to be doing this for?
Well, they already voted me out, so this is my last.
Not a vote.
I already know, and they already have a calendar up. They pull off the days as they go. I'm retiring at the end of the year, so they are. It's going to be the four of them come January 1st, 2026.
This is news. Is that so? You're not joking about that
No,
part.
no,
You're retiring at the end of the year.
Yeah.
What about you, John?
Griffin, I'm in my early 50s, so I plan to continue working for quite a while.
Oh. Then, Bill, you're really in a different position. So I want to push you on the golden parachute thing for a second, because I've just heard so many darn times what you've said. And I believe the sincerity of what you said, that you care about the people that you're leaving behind. Legacy is important to you. You've seen other people not be so happy afterwards and maybe have a little bit of seller's remorse. And I believe in the sincerity of what you're saying. I've also believed in other people that have said similar things and believed in their sincerity. But I just think it's like Grandpa's Farm. We'll never sell Grandpa's Farm. We'll never sell Grandpa's Farm until somebody comes and offers us way more money than we ever thought Grandpa's Farm should be worth. And then you start to think, well, gosh, with that much money, we could donate to the causes that Grandpa cared about. We could buy a new fund for all of Grandpa's college. We could do a college fund for all of Grandpa's grandkids. We could do a big family reunion trip every year, and not cynically, but truthfully challenge those things that they thought were important when they're faced with that kind of golden parachute.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So maybe it wasn't sincerity, maybe it's ignorance. But when Dr. Schoentuck was talking, I was just thinking, when I got out of fellowship, they didn't talk to us about, we weren't debating whether it was private equity or venture capital or just going into independent practice. It was, are you going to stay in academics or are you going to go into private practice? So it was totally different then. And when I left the university to form this, private equity wasn't that big of a deal at the time. It was in a different way. It wasn't the finances, but it was almost getting away from private equity in the sense that you were kind of getting away from Big Brother. You were getting away from the university and all the regulations and meetings and lack of control that you have when you're working for a university is why you go out or at least one of the main reasons we went out and set up a practice almost 20 years ago. So I think there is sincerity in the fact that, hey, the money wasn't the primary factor that we went out. It was to keep our autonomy. And so when you talk about golden parachute and all the money, first of all, all five of us are going to do well financially. Could we have done that much better if they bought out in the future? Possibly, but, and I'm not trying to sound, haughty about it, but, how much money do you actually need to be, satisfied with things? If your life is comfortable and you have control of your practice, you have a good group of physicians you work with, and you can take care of patients. So, people, when they talk about the money situation, I think the autonomy is one of the main reasons. When I knew we were going to do this talk, I was thinking of different scenarios, but I would think it would be extremely frustrating being a physician, having gone through all the training we've gone through, to have a business person who hasn't done any medical training tell you that how you should take care of patients. I mean, I think that would be the most frustrating thing. Now, would it be a different situation if we hadn't been a successful practice? Griffin, when we opened this, and we were in so much debt to open this. I opened this with a physician from one of the other universities, Dr. Couchman. I mean, we were in debt and we were spending a lot of money, and actually IntegraMed approached us. And it was, I talked to business associates because we almost went with IntegraMed. There were two reasons. Number one, they needed 3 providers before they would consider you, and we only had 2 providers. So we didn't do it. And then most business people who had done it, they said, you sell out the private equity, sell out the venture capitalists. Most people will regret that in the long run. And if you can just hang it together for a while and get over that, that initial debt, it'll probably pay dividends in the long run. Not just monetarily, but being able to take care of your practice and your patients.
I see the autonomy argument crystal clear if I'm in Megan or John's position. That's why I like owning a business. I like being able to call the shots and do what I think is right. And I think it's really different when you have investor obligations or you have other shareholders to behold to. I can decide how much people are going to make. I can decide how much we have to work. You can do the right thing when you have to, and you're only accountable to your own top line. I think it makes sense in the stages of career where they're at. For someone that's going to retire, I think the situation's a little bit different because, you just say, all right, I'm going to eat crow for 2 or 3 years, not have autonomy. I'm going to be somebody else's employee after having ran this ship for however many years. But it's the price that I'm paying for this huge multiple that they're giving me.
Yeah,
For you?
I got you. So there's a couple of reasons why even if I had wanted to, maybe wanted to do that, I wouldn't have done it. Number one is I ran it by Dr. Bowling was younger at the time, but we got approached and talked to him about, is that something you want to do? And we listened to people, and they paid us money, and we would have made a lot of money initially, but then things kind of evened out over the long run compared to how we're doing. The other thing too is how we have our voting structure, not to get into it in depth, but I don't have 100% of the vote. In fact, how we have it structured, even if I had wanted to and another person in the practice had voting, they would have voted that down if they had wanted to. So I didn't have complete control on the voting of how the practice would go.
John and Megan, do you see the opportunity for groups your size to merge together, maybe in acquisition, maybe in cashless merger, but not private equity backed? I'm thinking of something somewhat akin to the growth of Shady Grove, where they did some acquisitions, but they grew for a long time before they were private equity owned, and they did so with they had an executive leadership in place, but it was physician owned. Do you think that's possible for you all to merge? And I'll just make up some doctors' names like John Schnorr, Sam Brown, John Nichols, John Payne, Sam Chantillis. Do you think it's possible for you guys and others out there, you guys and gals, to form
Absolutely.
a really awesome physician
network
owned network? Is that still is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that this happens in other specialties. I just spoke with someone the other day in dermatology, also dental practices. So there are independently owned networks that are not backed by private equity. And, we've had some brief conversations with others about doing that. So we know that it's possible, but it's still, there's a lot to be gained by that. For example, the economies of scale, being able to negotiate with vendors to get the deepest discount possible on certain supplies. But as you start doing that, you still are faced with some of the issues that you would also face if you were joining a network backed by private equity, such as the loss of autonomy, the lack of freedom to be able to choose what culture media you want to use, what catheters you want to use, because giving that up comes with the ability on the business side to use the large numbers of a network to leverage that to reduce your costs. So we'd still be facing some of the disadvantages that we'd face if we were joining a network backed by private equity. And so at this point, we're still not interested in doing something like that.
Well, let's talk about the flip side to those disadvantages. Megan and Lauren, I think you're in the bracket that probably has to think about this thing that I So I see the benefits to consolidation and I see the cons. One of the cons that I see is I don't like the limited concentration of buyers. I think it's not good for the field. I think we need more groups your size, more 5, 10, 15 doctor privately owned groups to help spur innovation. Because what's happening right now is you've got 6 or 8 networks that are really dominating a lot of the buying. And so a lot of the solutions that are emerging, they need to either hit a grand slam or they're done. The barrier to entry is almost zero sum. And if there was a more distributed pool of buyers, still of decent economies of scale, I think we'd start to see more solutions get adopted. On the flip side, though, what I see is I really do believe that IVF is going to become a high volume field of medicine. I think whether it comes from the political mandates or simply the employers merging or going the insurance route or the EBM route in a more concentrated way, that it is going to be a higher volume field of medicine. And so operations need to change to be able to see a lot more patients, to do a lot more retrievals. And as you said in the beginning, Bill, oftentimes independent practices, they're worried about the problems that are in front of them. You're so committed to the delivery of care that it's hard to work on those systemic issues. So Megan, Lauren, how do you see this? How do you take time from I've got to do X number of retrievals and see X number of patients as a physician to actually then put on a business hat and say, here's how we're going to innovate the practice at a systemic level?
Yeah. I think it's a really good question. I mean, I would credit John and Bill for a lot of those ideas and having kind of that global mentality. Yes, we deal with the problems in front of us, but some of the problem that's in front of us is, okay, well, to grow, we have to have an office in another location. We need to capture a different part of the community that we serve, and I think it's a balance, right? I think for us that sort of planning has come out of what do we need to grow and get better, and what does that solution look like for us? So I think it's been more of an organic process of how do we capture more of the market share and do that in a way that is really true to the culture of the practice. And I think that we've been successful in doing that. We just opened our 4th office, which is already very busy. And say I would especially credit Dr. Meyer. He's always thinking outside of the box and always pushing us to think about things differently, which I appreciate.
Putting you all on the spot now, what are some technologies that you've adapted in the last 2 or 3 years that you didn't have before that was a response to your growth?
I think the biggest one, Griffin, is upgrading our EMR. That was so instrumental with opening up new satellites and with our ability to do so many remote consults, both on phone and virtual. The ability to monitor patients when they're going through treatment at any different satellite. We follow our own patients, so we can monitor their ultrasound findings, their lab results from anywhere. And so that's really helped with patient care, because prior to this current EMR, we weren't able to do that.
I think one of the things we've seen is that there's been a huge shift in we're in the South, we are in North Carolina, and we have actively worked to partner with groups that provide some sort of financing for IVF. And I know that I share your dream that this is going to become a field where there are going to be, we're going to be doing thousands of egg retrievals. But the current day and age, we just don't see that. They're very, I think we are limited by geography and how many other clinics are in the triangle with us, that we all compete for a limited number of patients. And so by, we bring in patients in ways to kind of make IVF more affordable. And we do that by Dr. Park being part of research projects that provide IVF cycles for free for patients who don't have insurance. We see, we partner with Progeny, Maven, Kindbody. We bring in more patients and with insurance, these carve-out programs. So I think compared to when I started, even just 5 years ago, maybe like 15% of patients had insurance coverage in North Carolina. And now we're seeing a switch to like more and more patients, or 60 or 70% having some sort of coverage. And so I think making ourselves available to these other groups and showing them how strong they partner with us because we have strong success rates. And we have strong success rates because we've remained independent. We've actively worked to, anytime we see any problems with pregnancy rates, we're on it and we're analyzing our protocols and seeing what can we change, what can we do different. We enact it the next day and we're able to make changes that we are able to kind of keep our pregnancy rates high so that groups like Gaia and Progeny want to work with us. So I think that's another way we've kind of enacted it.
The guys I mentioned, I think you ended up finding out about them all through Inside Reproductive Health, if I'm not mistaken, John. You told me that when we met with them at ASRM. So I love hearing that come full circle. That when you heard about them through us, but also that it's one of the things that you're happy about. Tell me about the EMR. Who are you with now, and what do you like about them?
We're using Enable now, and Dr. Bowling is the one who kind of spearheaded the process of going through the screening process of seeing what products were out there, having arranged for demos, and Enable really was just the best fit for us in following the workflow of patients, looking at the treatment cycles, the work list, how that is populated and how it's customizable. So it was really just the right fit for an office that had multiple satellites, where we don't have one particular physician tied to one particular satellite. So we tend to rotate around. We'll take turns driving out to our Wilmington office. And so we needed the ability to follow all of our patients, regardless of where they were geographically.
Did you do some vetting, Megan? Did you go through a bunch of demos, and how'd you come to that decision?
Yeah, we, this is like years ago. We did it right after COVID, but yeah, I think we were looking at, we had narrowed it down to 3. I think Artisan was in there. I think we ended up just, vetting them. I initially vetted them. I think we got it down to Artisan and Enable, and then ultimately kind of decided on Enable.
What was the deciding factor for you?
It's a great question. I don't remember now. I think,
well, too late now. You ain't changing now. Once you change an EMR, it's like the best EMR in the entire galaxy could come out the next day and people would say, talk to us in 5 years or never.
I think there was something to do with cryo management, John. Is that part of it, where they monitored the cryo for us and that wasn't available with the other groups we were looking at? There were little pieces. There wasn't anything major. Again, it just felt like a better fit for us overall.
What they did was they stuck me in a room with it and they said, if he can figure it out, then we're going to do okay.
Ease of use.
Yeah.
And you got through it, Bill? You got through the maze?
It took me 3 years, but yeah, I think I got a handle on it now.
When I talked to Mark Amos, he owns a group called New Direction in Phoenix. It's a pretty high volume center. He's doing 80 new patients a month. He says each of his docs are as well. They have advanced practice providers. So what he thinks is going to happen is that he gets, I think right now he's doing 2 visits, the follow-up and the new patient consult, but with using some automation and tool like Levy Health and some other things, that they'll be able to see one patient in a 30-minute visit so that's a condensed, the first visit and the follow-up. And he thinks that they'll be able to increase their new patient per doc by at least 50%. So let's say 120, 150, maybe more patients per doctor per month. Do you all see yourselves having to get on a model that can do that within the coming years?
Our patient volume isn't that strong, Griffin. There isn't a need for us to take on that kind of volume. I think it would be really difficult to get to know your patients and to be able to really follow them and individualize their care when you're working with that kind of numbers. But that's not an issue that I think we're going to be facing anytime soon. I think, to kind of go back to one of your questions you asked earlier about, where we'll be in the future. There's in our area, there is this lane for independent practices, and we've had this slow, steady, organic growth since Dr. Meyer founded the practice. And so many patients are coming to us just from word of mouth. A lot of patients show up and say, I started at this one practice, but I was talking to my friends once I started getting involved in this whole fertility process. And turns out I had 3 other friends that had been to Carolina Conception, so I decided to switch. That happens all the time. And so we have this advantage of being the most established private practice in the area, and that really works to our advantage. And I think that we will continue to see this organic growth. And a lot of the success, I think, is attributed to the ability to really get to know our patients and walk them through the process. So I think that would be really hard to do with 100 new patients a month.
What if, for the first time ever, a politician actually did what he said he was going to do, and IVF is paid for by either the government or all insurance companies, and now there's a handful of payers, and they say, here's what we're paying, and everybody's covered, and that changes things. What if something like that happens?
We'd probably hire more physicians immediately.
More physicians and more APPs. We would figure out a new system, and we've already had conversations of how to get patients in the door, triaging them to seeing an APP for an initial consult versus an MD. But I don't know if there's any new technology that will really help us increase the volume or increase our capacity of getting patients in the door. Yeah, I just don't see anything right now, and I think that if something were to change with legislation, that we'd be aware of it and we'd be able to make some changes to help accommodate that increase in volume.
Are you passively or actively hiring new docs now? There's a lot of fellows that we got the third years, second years, and first years that tune in fairly regularly. If some of them are interested in the Carolinas, or how open is your door right now?
I'd say it's open. Yeah. I mean, I think with, we know with Dr. Meyer retiring that we definitely are going to need another physician probably fairly soon. So yeah, we're definitely on the lookout. I will be at ASRM this year. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to meet with you at ASRM if we have any interest from fellows.
Bill, are you going to sail the 7 seas, or are you going to stick around and be there to pinch hit? Maybe see a couple patients if Monica gets sick or if somebody's going on vacation. Are you going to do any of the part-time thing?
I think they would get sick if I did that. No, no, there's no way. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. They're going to do great. Yeah, I want to do some other stuff, family stuff, traveling. We know what everybody says, right? That's why I want to do some of that stuff. It's going to be fun. I want to come back and I want to hear how they're doing. I think they'll do well with things. But yeah, I'm ready to pack my bags and go. It's been fun. We got a great group. I mean, it's great to turn it over to 4 great docs and see how it's going to go. It'll be fun to see, watch from the outside in.
For those that are ready to sail around the world, they're ready to go, and you're thinking about that next step. You're thinking about selling your practice, stepping back from ops, or just focusing on medicine more than management. You might want to talk to the folks at MidCap. They can help you figure out what comes next. They'll work with you to understand your goals. They will help you. They'll get into the books a little bit. They do this all for free, by the way. They don't charge a retainer or anything like that. They explore options like selling to a larger group. They're very patient, a little too patient in my estimate, but that's why the people they work with like them and trust them so much. They'll take a look at merging with PE-backed groups. They'll look at the model that's best for you, merging with other groups or selling or strategic opportunities. And they'll run that competitive process to find the right fit, and they'll handle all of that stuff for you. So if you're thinking about your next chapter, get in touch with the folks at MidCap Advisors. We'll put their contact in there. For this great group of docs that's taking over, we do have a lot of younger docs that are listening, and maybe not just fellows, but folks that have not found their forever home yet and maybe have been practicing for a couple years. What advice do you have for them?
I would say to really focus on being honest with yourself about what you want in a practice and what environment you want to practice in long term. I would, if we haven't said it before, I would say it now. I mean, our practice has an incredible culture in terms of the physicians that work here. And when I was making a decision about where I was going to spend the next part of my career, that was a huge part of it. Do I like the people that I'm going to spend at least 40 hours a week with, right? Do I want to see these people? Do I want to interact with them? Are they good doctors? Can I trust that if I go on vacation or I'm out for a day, that they'll take good care of my patients? I think that's really important. I think also looking at the values of the people that you would potentially practice with. I think one of the things that has made this practice really strong is that we are all similar in our value structure and what we want and how we want to practice medicine. That doesn't mean that we are all the same, but I think at heart we have the same values, and we can sit in a room and be honest with each other and talk about when we don't agree, and then have enough respect for each other to say it's more important that we talk about it and we come to a conclusion that's right for us as a group. So I'd say that those intangibles are really important. And then also looking at practice structure, like we've talked about in terms of independent practices versus private equity. There's not a one size fit model, and different people will land differently on that. But I think a lot of people look at private equity and think, oh, there's a lot of, oh, I feel safe, I feel comfortable. They're a big network. There's not anything that's going to happen to me there. And maybe they look at an independent practice and feel like, is there as much of a safety net? And having gone through the IntegraMed collapse, I can tell you that you can be very vulnerable in private equity. And at the end of the day, you have to decide how much autonomy you want in your practice and who do you want at the table with you 10 years, 15 years down the road, right? At a small independent practice, I know who's going to be at the table with me, right? It's the people I'm looking at on this podcast. I know their values. I know what they want. You can't always say the same thing in private equity because someone else is going to be at the table with you in 10 years.
Monica, how do you keep that value alignment as new folks come in? Because I think you got lucky with the Bill Meyer. I'm not blowing sunshine, Bill. I think that it's noble. I think that there are so few people that can really be at a position that Bill has been in and say, I've made enough money, I'm good. There's just not a lot of those folks, and so you've gotten, maybe lucky is not the right word, but fortunate in that you have this group. But how do you keep that going? That as you got docs coming in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, that you make sure that you keep those values aligned?
Yeah, I think Dr. Bowling said it well towards the beginning, where she said when she joined, she always had that thought in the back of her mind of if they will sell the practice before she makes partner. And I think right, that's a very easy thought to have. And it's one that I think commonly probably even Dr. Johnson has thought of a couple times. And I definitely have thought of myself. It's that question of stability, if you will. But on the other hand, knowing that these people are who they are and having met them a couple of times during the interview process and really seeing that core value, I felt safe enough to, really accept that possibility, but knowing that likely wouldn't happen and that it's the fear of the unknown, right? So I think when you join a practice that is not private equity, there's always that potential for it to be purchased and have a change in hand and have to join the private equity group. But I would say, as you can probably tell, I felt pretty confident that this group, just given the stability and the truly the culture of the group, I felt the chance of that was going to be small. Now, could it happen? Yes. But honestly, I think they would still speak with me and have part. So I would have some say as to if we were to ever sell in private equity. And I think it's a lot about choosing the right person, right? So I always joke that the bar was set real low and they chose to bring me on as a practice because they're also incredible doctors. But I think we really put a lot of effort into who we hire at our practice. And that goes for the docs as well as nursing and everyone we work with, because we want to create and continue to create this culture where we practice as a group. We all have very similar values and continue to work together as a team to take care of our patients. And so I think moving forward, even though it's going to be lovely to expand our group and take on new doctors, I think we're going to probably look for that same type of core values of people who are wanting to join and put efforts towards our big ultimate goal.
Megan, what type of personality would not be a good fit for your group?
Can I say Dr. Meyer's person? No, I'm
So funny.
That's a
I
good
wasn't
answer.
using my voice.
I set it up so you didn't have to name him.
Oh my gosh.
I think definitely somebody who's kind of out for their own, someone who doesn't want to kind of, go with not go with the flow, but, we all want to practice similarly. So we can all choose our own protocols, but overall we practice very similarly. And we want someone who's going to fall into that kind of protocol where they are able to kind of go with evidence-based medicine and go with what is best for the practice, what is best for our patients. We don't want someone who's kind of out, who wants to do their own thing, who also it doesn't share the values of like kindness and respect of nurses and doctors and embryologists. I mean, we are definitely very much a family here. So someone who just really cares about their patients and wants to do the right thing, I think is what we're looking for, and not someone who is more kind of out for themselves.
I think what's really funny is we all have very different personalities, Claire. We're all very different, but I think it's like in such a beautiful way because similarly, like with patients, it's almost a personality match. As Dr. Park was saying, like we really truly do love to get to know our patients and kind of walk them through this process and this journey hand in hand. But as I'm sure many of us has experienced, like there are sometimes like mismatches with personality of the doc and the patient. And that's okay in our practice because all of us are so different that normally they'll find a different doc with a different personality that works great for them. But I agree with Dr. Bowling. I think it's like we all have that same like teamwork in mind at the core of our personalities, which is why it like blends so well.
Who's going to take over as the chop buster now that Bill's gone?
I know.
Are one of you going to fill that role, or are you going to look for a fellow with a Don Rickles sense of humor?
Dr. Meyer is irreplaceable.
Yeah.
She'll be so missed.
You all have been so much fun. I thought that having 5 docs on was a logistically terrible idea, but a great content idea, and it was. And so I'd love to have you all back on or cover what you're up to in other ways. Thank all of you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Griffin.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Griffin.
Today's advertiser helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertiser. The advertiser does not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertiser. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.